Lesson 7.2 brings us to sample proportions. Now we're going to actually take what we've been learning about these distributions of samples and make some inferences about them. So inference is just taking what we're observing and making some conclusions about our population. We're going to take a look at all the methods and the steps that we need to do to make our inferences. And we're returning to that 4-step process: state, plan, do, conclude. We've seen that before. It was way back in chapter 4 when we were designing studies. So there's definitely a connection. We need to be able to design good studies, and the better the study is, the better inferences we can make and the conclusions we can make. I'm going to pause here and talk about when we do these kind of studies and when scientists and researchers use these studies, they often cannot do many samples. That would be ideal. So you'll see very often that a study is contradicted later on when more information is available. So it's really important that you understand when you hear out in the world, out in the news, whenever there's a study and it says, hey, they found this in the study, remember that that's normally an initial finding, and that you really should follow up and find out if there was more information found, if it's something you're interested in. So let's take a look at a sampling distribution of a sample proportion. When we did our M&Ms lab, we looked at the proportion of M&Ms, and this is a very common method, is to look at proportions, percentages of a population. So we've got a population. Notice the population has a size capital N. The sample size, which is also the number of trials, has a small n. So we're going to define p hat as the proportion of successes in the sample. So if x is the amount of successes in the sample, this is pretty easy. This is actually going to look like a mean. So n is the size of our sample or number of trials. Just like the geometric and binomial conditions, we do have conditions we need to have met before we can start making inferences. The first thing is the randomization condition. Make sure the sample is random. It's okay to assume randomization in a well-designed study. Sometimes you'll be reading a scenario and it will say this information came from a well-designed study, so that should give you a clue. Sometimes it will even just say a designed study or a scientifically designed study. Those kind of terms are implying that randomization did occur. Next is the 10% condition. This is the condition that ensures independence. We've discussed that when you take samples from a population, that does change your proportion over time. However, we can assume that our probabilities will stay fixed and our proportions of successes to failures will stay fixed if we don't remove more than 10% of the samples from the population. So that's what this 10% condition means. When we're writing this in an inference problem, the notation we use is right here. So n is less than or equal to 10% of the, you can actually just abbreviate it to POP, so that we don't have to, because we need to conserve our time. But of course, you would replace that n with the actual sample size. Often this needs to be assumed, so you might have to add the word assume that n is less than or equal to 10% of the population, and you'll see this as we go through problems in the future. And the final one is the success, failure, or large counts condition. We do this step to ensure that we actually have a normal distribution. Some of you might remember that when we did our M&M activity, when our sample size was rather small, when we started with 10, sometimes we could truncate the edge of our sample, and so it didn't look normal. And we're going to go over this again in class. But what we want to make sure is that our sample isn't so small that it's shoving against the upper or lower edges of our distribution, creating skew. There's two ways to check for this. What we're going to do is take what we are either given or assume is our population proportion, so our parameter, times our sample size, and we want to make sure that this is greater than or equal to 10. This will ensure that our distribution is not skewed on one of the tails of our uh, normal shape. Then the same thing applies for 1 minus p. So this would be the opposite side of the distribution. And I'm not saying left or right because it depends on whether our p is less than 50% or greater than 50%. So this would also be 10. So these are the two formulas you really need to know, and it's something you have to show when you're doing these problems. So let's get into some of the statistics and how we can calculate them. They're actually pretty straightforward. I'm going to recall out here in the margin the two binomial formulas because there's a huge connection between these binomial formulas because we really are doing a binomial distribution here, and the mean of the sampling distribution and the standard deviation. So from the last chapter, we learned that the mean of a binomial distribution is n times p, and the standard deviation was the square root of npq, or 1 minus p. I could have used q up here. Recall that earlier in this lesson we learned that p hat was our random variable x over n. We could also write this as 1 over n times the random variable x. And what has happened now is we've now created a multiplier. So we're doing those linear or those transformations that we've come to love, and our multiplier is 1 over n. Putting it all together, I'm going to change that. The PDF wouldn't transfer the little hat on the p, so that should be the mean of p hat, meaning the mean of our sampling distribution is the same as our binomial distribution, but we need to multiply it by that scalar, that 1 over n. And you can see these n's will cancel out. What I'm left with is just the population proportion. The sampling distribution and the population proportion should both have the same mean if all your conditions are met. I'm going to go a little bit faster for the standard deviation because you really don't need to understand all of this math, but I'm showing you where this is coming from. So the standard deviation is going to have the same multiplier applied to it. It gets a little bit trickier here because what I need to do is I need to be able to take this n and put it inside my square root here. So you have to kind of think about this. If you get lost in the math, don't worry about it because all you need to really know is the end result. In order to get this n into the square root, or this 1 over n into the square root, what I needed to do was square it, because think about it, if you undo this, if we go backwards, the square root of n would be just, n squared would just be n. And one of these n's will cancel out that n, and what I'm left with is the square root of p times q, all divided by n. So that's just a complement. Remember, this is the same as 1 minus p. And also, I did forget at the very beginning, this should be p hat, not p. So p hat is our sampling standard deviation, not our population. So we've got this new formula here, and this is what you need to know. Don't panic. Don't think, oh my gosh, I'll never remember all of this stuff. You don't have to. I'm just showing you where it came from.